What do you mean when you say I'm being impactful?
It's a really good question, and it's extremely subjective. So when I say I am trying to make an impact, obviously I am talking about what my values are. My goal is to see the people in my community and in the world to live in a way where they are able to make the best decisions for themselves, because they are not burdened by existential fears for being able to feed themselves or live safely. So they can make the choices for themselves and their families that are motivated by their own values and what they think would be best.
A lawyer can be like, I give $1,000 a month from my income to X, Y, and Z, and I hope they're doing good for people who can't afford, top-notch lawyers. But if you didn't do that and you took your top-notch advice that got you where you are and gave 5% of that time to somebody who really needs it and did that pro bono work, the effect of the outcome of that case, whatever it may be, it's going to be tremendously higher than that $1,000 that you gave away. So I really, really admire that you understand that and are doing that, because not a lot of people do. A lot of people think if I give a big chunk away or a big percentage away, more people will come to me because that's always charitable. It's become a marketing gig by itself.
I do want to think bigger, but I don't think that big is the only option.
Yes, do what you can, basically.
Yeah, and every day you have a different capacity, right? Like every day I interact with different people. I can tip the barista more or less. I can give extra money to a homeless person if I see them. I can know right away that will help with whatever their goals are.
Buy a dozen beignets for your office instead of a pack of 3.
Yeah, right? Like there are so many ways to brighten people's days. I can go to my neighbor's because she's short and I can reach things off the top shelf for her. And I have made her day easier, right? Like I can do that, and it's so easy, and it doesn't take any effort, and it energizes me then to give more.
Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I'm your host, Ali Horiat. My goal in this program is to educate our audience about various global issues and how we can help. My guest today is Lizy Freudmann. Educated at Brown University with a Bachelor of Arts in American Civilization and Tulane University with an MBA and MGM. MGM is a Master's in Global Management. She has worked in various fields and places, such as Universal Music Group. Sorry, if you're an aspiring artist, email her. She'll get you through. I'm just kidding. You're going to get tons of music now. You're going to get tons of all your music to Lizy. I'm just kidding. And Bloomberg. So if you have any questions for trading or anything else, reach out to her. She'll give you advice on where to put your money. I'm just kidding.
That is definitely not where you should be asking me. I worked at we can talk about this later, but I worked at like a startup within Bloomberg that was like financial education, really not managing money. So do not come to me with your money problems. I do.
I'm just trying to stop all sorts of scam to you right now. So he lived in New York City, Providence, LA, and now settled in actually one of my all-time favorite cities and probably my top 3 in the United States, New Orleans. I love it there. Most importantly, she is the founder of One More Thing, LLC. And the beautiful thing about what she does there that I want to start at the intro and get everybody to hear this now is she gives 5% of her time in service to others. A fascinating concept for me, as opposed to giving money, because sometimes with our involvement, we actually, and with our interactions, we actually contribute more to the people we're there to support than just giving money. I've noticed a lot of times people give money and you're giving money to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing with the money, and the money then doesn't really help. And I try to call it smart money because to me smart money is kind of like the money where the money itself knows what to do and where it's going. So when you have somebody attached to collaborating with you with money who knows a little more and can be a leader or a mentor in a sense along with money, then it really helps. And in the business world, you see this. For example, a lot of people have seen Shark Tank. When they pitch, people pitch their ideas. You've got the panel. Then the panel pitches back, and they're like, "You want to work with me because I have contacts in this industry. You're trying to sell this to Walmart. I am part owner." So it really helps. The money that they're putting in your business really moves your product as well because they have decision making say along the line. And so that's the important part. It's not just the money, because you can find the money in many places, but where do you find the smart money? And that's where it comes for me. It's really important that people contribute their time more than their money, especially people in service like marketing, lawyers, real estate agents, because a lawyer can be like, I give $1,000 a month from my income to X, Y, and Z, and I hope they're doing good for people who can't afford top notch lawyers. But if you didn't do that and you took your top notch advice that got you where you are and gave 5% of that time to somebody who really needs it and did that pro bono work, the effect of the outcome of that case, whatever it may be, whatever law practice area it may be in, is going to be tremendously higher than that $1,000 that you gave away. So I really, really admire that you understand that and are doing that, because not a lot of people do. A lot of people think if I give a big chunk away or a big percentage away, more people will come to me because that's always charitable. It's become a marketing gig by itself. So I like that you're not doing that. But all that aside, hello, Lizy, and welcome to
Hi.
Compassiviste Dialogue. Let's start with Rhode Island, the smallest state with the most donut shops. I know that as trivia stuff that I learned. You went to Brown there, so
I
give
did.
me a little experience about that, and why American civilization. Like, you go in there and you're like, I'm going to study American civilization. What did you want to be when you grew up that drove you there?
That's a great question. So some of those things have very clear answers and some less clear answers. So Providence is great to answer some questions about Providence. It's adorable. Coming from New York, I was astonished that it qualified as a city, but I got over my big city elitism and learned to love it for what it was. I do think that when you go to live someplace as a college student or as a graduate student, it's different than living there as a person who is fully engaged in the community and running a business or sending their children to school or whatever. I came to New Orleans in 2011, but I feel like I didn't really fully integrate into the community until after I graduated, because I was at campus is its own little bubble. But why American civilization? I had a really great series of history teachers in high school, actually. And my American history teacher in 10th grade, Andy Myers, was especially compelling in the way he encouraged us to look for primary source information about the American experiment, such as it is, and what it means to be an American. And and he was very innovative. He's a cool guy. I still follow him on social media, occasionally check in with him. He definitely conveyed when I was very young, relatively speaking, that what it means to be an American is more than like what's on my passport, but also just like how I consume media, my perception of the world, what markets look like, right? Because when we talk about financial markets, and at least in the United States and to some degree like in the greater West, there's a sense of control that I think Americans really relate to. So um, it's an interesting hypothesis that when I was in 10th grade, it was interesting to the hypothesis that like my perspective is so tied to the community in which I grew up and the like mythos around that community and what I believe to be true about the place that I lived. And like older, now I'm older, and obviously like it seems much less revelatory, but when I was younger, it was very interesting. And so when I started my undergrad, I really liked the idea of American civilization because it was American history, but we also took art history classes and learned about like textiles and learned about gravestones and learned about religion and learned about literature. And was very interdisciplinary. We learned about like the development of advertising models and all kinds of interesting stuff. I really liked it. What did I want to be when I grew up? Well, when I was young, I wanted to be an actress on Broadway. And then I don't know, I wanted to work in the music industry. I didn't know that I had a particular title in mind so much, but I wanted to work in music because I loved music.
Okay.
Those are long answers.
No, that's good. But you wanted to work in music because you love music. Do you play music? Do you sing? Do you play guitar? Is there any musical side
In
of it, or is it the
yeah,
industry you wanted to be in?
all of the above. When I was younger, I did a lot of like I was in my school chorus and I sang a lot and I was in lots of musicals and love music. I love all kinds of music. I love classical music. I love musicals. I love rock music. I love like hip hop. I love all kinds of music. The industry was very interesting to me because I guess it's hard to go put myself back in the mindset that I was when I was 22. I guess probably if you could have said, like, you can do anything in the industry, I would have said, I want to put together artists and repertoire and say, like, this is the song that you should use, and this is the next one, and here's the look that you should go with, and here's the tour, right? Like, really thoughtfully crafting that artist and repertoire, and also like some element of management with like tour planning, but I don't think I knew enough about the industry to know whose job was what at the time. So I didn't really, it wasn't super specific.
Okay. And then you went to school and just decided, never mind the music, I'm going to do American Civilization.
No, it wasn't never mind the music. It was also always with the music was always happening, right? Like all of my free time was spent going to concerts and like
Yeah, but even
joining what we
work-wise,
called,
later you went and worked for Universal Music. So
yeah,
you kind of turned back after school. So my question really
it
was,
was
why did you not go to a music school or like go study music management or something like directly? How did American Civilization? I mean, Professor or your teacher Myers
yeah.
influence, but what else?
Well, I guess to me, they're not that separate, right? Like, so when I was in college studying American civilization, whatever else I was taking classes in, I was also spending my free time like putting up posters for local bands, like going to driving around the country to see different artists. Like, it was always something I was doing, volunteering to like sell t-shirts at shows. It was it was always happening at the same time. And to me, I never really saw that there was a wall between what I was learning in the classroom and what I was doing in my free time, right? Like I applied all of the interesting things that I learned about like identity and personality and advertising models and like what makes people excited, and I brought them to the shows with me, and
So it's
I
very
never felt, yeah,
interactive in a sense,
right,
from your school to your life to your love of music. It kind
right,
of built on each other, so to speak.
yeah. It
And
never
and
felt it never felt like a distinct thing.
right,
Um,
and that graduation eventually led you to a city of music.
yeah,
In
Los Angeles. I
yeah,
started
you went
working
to
in
LA,
the,
and then further from LA, you come to New Orleans, which is another like music haven, so to speak. So maybe not industry wise, like work wise, but like in the innovative and
yeah.
in the musical concept. I mean, so you've always kind of traveled into in those spaces of music. And now, other than music, before I get into the complex stuff, you are a sci-fi fantasy fan.
Yes,
I know you have a dog.
I do have a dog.
Yes, and you're a noodle enthusiast. So I
Yes,
know
a
you have.
noodle enthusiast.
Yes. What is that? That's what I want to know first. The other one
What is
seems
a
easy.
noodle enthusiast? I love like I love it's really not it sounds more exciting than it is. I just love noodles. Everywhere I go in the world, I want to know what their like noodle dish is. Everybody has a noodle dish, one way or another.
You're right. I can
And noodle
think of them. Yeah, you're right.
and noodles are my like ultimate comfort food. Like if I've had a bad day, I just want noodles. And I want to hear about your favorite pasta experience, and I want to hear about some like amazing off the beaten path dish
Mm.
that you had somewhere. Like I love noodles. It's
That's what it is. It's kind of like
it's
niche market food love.
yes. Well,
Only noodles.
well, I mean, I like other foods too, but every culture has like a donut, whatever they call it. It's like a piece of fried dough. If you go anywhere in the world, there will like pretty much there'll be some way that you can get fried dough. Um, I feel like noodles are the same in some form or another, and it's interesting. A
Mhm.
a worldwide comparative study of noodle dishes and fried dough dishes would be like my ultimate retirement fun activity.
And I think when you get into it, you start realizing so much more how different they are, even cities apart. Because um, I love traveling and I've traveled extensively. And when you spoke of noodles, I started remembering, um, just thinking of the Far East, going, let's just call it from Malaysia to the Philippines. There's so many different variations of noodles. And most people just think Chinese noodles, one style or one thing, and just remembering the names and which one was which that I loved and I didn't like, and I like this one better. And I had to keep telling people, the rounder, bigger, thicker one, it's shorter, and then they're like this one, and I'm like, and then they would show me a picture, or they would pull the noodle out, and I'm like, yeah, that's the one, and it took me so long to learn names and stuff, but then I started having preference, right, for noodles, right, and so that preference kind of built up for me, and um, like it, I don't know the names because I don't remember names, but the one they make pad thai with, the flat, um,
Yes,
yeah, that one, that is one of my favorites. The other one that
it's a great noodle.
yeah, and then the other one they use in Singapore, which is like round and slippery, like an eel, and it's kind of chewy. I love that one too. But then some of the really skinny, like spaghettini style ones, I'm not too much of a fan of. So I get what you mean in terms of being an enthusiast. In that case, everybody's a noodle enthusiast because I don't know who would talk about that. We could just make this show about that.
I know we could. I think it's fascinating. So I guess I
Yeah,
should probably say I'm an amateur noodle enthusiast, lest I like give myself more authority than I have, because like there are people who have very strong opinions on what pasta should go with what type of sauce, and they're
yeah.
like, well, if it's a chunky sauce, you need a thinner pasta, but if I mean, or maybe it's the opposite, but if you penne should go with this kind of sauce and that kind of sauce, and like complement how much the noodle the shape of the noodle or the shape of the pasta will hold the flavor of the sauce. I mean, it's very complicated, but at the
And
end
I
of the
love that. I love that. I
yeah,
love people like that because I had a friend of mine who was a chef, and I had in one of the homes I had for a short period. um, it belonged to a builder who had built the home for themselves, and then they sold it later. And I was the buyer, and he was a hobbyist chef. So he had this really ridiculous kitchen. Now, mind you, I don't even know how to turn the stove on. So for me, it was just a beautiful design space. Like I love the design of it, the architecture of it. Then I had this one friend who was a chef, and he's like, we're gonna have the best dinners here on my days off, and he would come over and really cook up a feast, and that person was like that. He was like, I was like, well, we have this pasta here. He's like, we can't make that pasta with
yeah,
this. I'm like, why? It's pasta. He's like, no, you need this. And it became so specific, like it was a huge
yes,
difference between tortellini and ravioli for him, and I was like,
yeah,
what?
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I understand exactly where you come from.
But also, like, to take it back, this is like to take it back to like who Lizzie is as a person, just for a minute here. When I mentioned like the fried dough and the noodles, like everyone in the world has them. As a person who also likes to travel and who likes to just meet people and talk with people, it's sort of a universal question, right? So like, what's a fried dough story you have? Tell me about a noodle in your life. It's like everybody almost everybody will be able to have a story about that. So one of the things I like about it is it's sort of a great equalizer.
Yes, very true. Food, music, both of your hobbies are very equalizing. The noodle, the music, both of them. And even, you know what, even speaking of equalizing, even the animal love, you're
Yes.
a dog lover and parent, that too is very equalizing in the sense that animals don't understand hierarchies and discriminations the way we do, right?
No, yeah.
So it really brings you down to this level of reciprocity, respect, love, compassion, and you see it in them in that way. And it does that to me a lot when I interact with animals. It kind of grounds me to understand realities in a very different way than the way we manipulate them, whether it's through simple techniques of language or violent ways of, you know, using money and other things to manipulate the things that we want. Whereas in the animal kingdom, it's really obsolete of all of those things. It's very natural, it's very raw, it's very real. I think creating a character of you, through this is kind of like you have all of that passion for um, bringing everybody, in one space, in this communal space where there's equality, where there's safety, where there's freedom and liberties, and just everybody is in an inclusive embrace, wholesomely. Your hobbies, the things you do, and stuff, you kind of like represent that in without your work still. So you know it's great for me because I love when I communicate with people who live who they are, all in, as opposed to I don't know, I'm a dentist in the daytime, but at night I'm a completely different person. Or I'm this at the office, but like my values are completely different. I may work at a very horrible company, but it pays well, but my personal values are different. Like I have friction there because I feel like you're being hypocritical, right? Whereas when I speak with you, it's like this genuine energy just flows through you. So that's why I love
Well, thank you.
having these conversations with you. So speaking of that, I want to lead into this, going back to the person you are, culture, history, religion, American civilization that you went to school for, and especially the cities you lived in, grew up in, had you know kind of momentous moments of your life through them, like New York, LA. I guess how would you kind of relate your personal experiences and going to school and understanding the American civilization with who you understand yourself to be as an American? And before you answer, I also want to say you are also the reason why I keep saying I love New Orleans is it it gives me a little bit of that sense of this big soup of what America is through its history, through its music, through a lot of what happens in that city. And, whether it's beignets and food culture, jazz and music, voodoo and religion, and, Creole white, and all the, dark stories of history, the fire, and everything that happened, Louisiana, all the way to Katrina. I mean, that was a great an equalizer of
Yeah.
you know I think that was one of the catalyst moments of America becoming where it is today with the Trump kind of separation, because um, before that you really had to live in America and really had to experience America in a non um, upper middle class zone to see the inequality spread. Whereas all of a sudden, globally, on all news channels, you saw inequality right in the heart of America. You're like, oh my God, this whole state is just completely, and then the rest of the country is not reacting to it, and the government's not reacting to it. And this country's, the veil has been peeled off. So American became a very different understanding for me post Katrina versus the American dream and the polish and everything, that the veneer that they were selling, pre Katrina. I guess that hurricane washed away all the makeup. and then you saw something ugly underneath. So tell me how you relate to all of these things.
Well, it's interesting we're having this conversation November 1st. We have a big election coming up. It's interesting. We should revisit this. We should do a part 2 in like a month, and we'll see how I feel about it. Because I think it will be different one way or another. So I mean, to my recollection, I don't ever remember thinking of America as being the promised land of anyone can make it if they try, right? Like, I understood there to be some fundamental um, problematic issues with the structure of the government and um, the way that the society functioned. Um, I remember in that history class in high school that I was talking about earlier, uh, thinking a lot about um, the Salem witch trials, but also just like the what it meant to like have this cultural anxiety that like women with any sort of differences needed to be like extinguished, totally like set on fire and then extinguished or like hung or whatever the various methods of torturing women have been throughout time. That I recognize it to be like an expression of an existential doubt, as opposed to some sort of like righteous religious fervor. Um, and that has stuck with me since that 10th grade history class. Sorry, Mr. Myers, I'm pinning a lot of blame on you here for being such a good teacher. And
Mr. Myers.
I
I'm gonna find you, Mr. Myers.
send this to him. Maybe he'll be like, oh
Yeah,
no. Uh,
maybe we put him on the show and have him explain some of what you're saying.
no, he's a great teacher, but like he was so compelling and he had us do a lot of what we call document-based questions where we read firsthand accounts and what I intuited and what he instructed us to like help us understand was this that like even business documents or government documents reflect the social or the zeitgeist, right? Like the mood of the country at the time and the fear and the prejudice and the angst and the like lack of self-awareness about where one fits and then like trying to build a like a solid foundation that you can just be like, okay, I know that I fit here and this is great. Um, I have never felt like worked perfectly, and that the foundation has always seemed a little bit mushy to me. But the other thing that we did a lot in that history class was we spent a lot of time in the Constitution, and I did think that the Constitution, as a document for governance, was very thoughtfully and effectively written. Is there room for improvement? Yes, absolutely. Are there like abominable moral like disgraces in there? Yes, of course. There are hideous things about it, like absolutely hideous things about it. But from a effectiveness perspective, there are things about it that are very interesting and useful and applicable in all sorts of different ways, like the separation of powers specifically, as as an interesting an important moment of like articulating what makes a large organization, whether it's a country or a business or whatever, function and how it moves towards justice, even though it is in this document it was like inherently unjust because of its treatment of Native people and Black people and obviously slavery. They were like sure whatever, and women and all these other things. The separation of powers really struck me as very interesting. And of course, it's not the first document to have said that. We can trace its roots all the way back to like Charlemagne. But I liked the way it was expressed. There was something that resonated with me. And I still have like copies of the Constitution. I have one right here that I can just pull out when someone tells me that something is not in the Constitution. I can be like, well, actually, here it is.
Right. You know
And
what? You said something really interesting there. Um, that that I often think about. The fall of empires in the sense of, the United States is an empire. It's not
Yes.
a nation anymore. And the way I define empire is that your actions affect the world. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be a huge, you don't have to own the world to be an empire. You just have to have enough power to affect the world. So, there are places in the world today that we don't relate to as being empires because we understand it in this traditional sense of, you know, you had the Roman Empire, and as they grew geographically, they became an empire. But in today's digital world and in today's information power, ISIS is an empire because it affects the world. It affects the way we travel today. The way we get on a plane today and the way we get off a plane today is so different than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, all the kids used to go into the cockpit and see the pilot and like
Yeah.
so excited about that. Now it's like this danger zone. If you lounge around that area a little bit, people get anxious. They're like, why is he standing there? Like you go to the bathroom, you come out and you go back to your seat, and if you just hang out in the cockpit, like outside the door a little bit, people are like,
Yeah, if you try to get a soda or whatever, people are
yeah,
like,
it's scary, right? And I don't blame people. I'm just saying that's empire because the effect is empirical in that way, right? So the problem for me with the Constitution and all empires that fall is because it's so rigid that you can't change it with the changing times, right? I think it's like marriage. If I get married and I am the person I am when I got married at 22 and I never adapt and change and grow or nothing happens to me, I stayed that 22-year-old who got married and say, my partner, my wife, she is now 42. She's going to have different needs from me as a partner. And if I can't change, it's going to collapse. The marriage is going to collapse. And when the marriage collapses, we're going to have two separate countries now, two separate people, islands, who are going to say, hey, I want that 22-year-old version. Who's with me? Oh, all of us are with you. Okay, that's my group. Now I go into that country. I find myself a partner or wife in that country. Whereas now my partner or wife, you know, she's over there looking for someone who has evolved, and now it's a new country. And then the divides happen, and then the divides become geographical, they become in many different ways, right? And then the collapse, boom, done. But if we were able to adapt, it would be a different story.
I agree and I disagree, right? There's, I, th- um,
But wait, what is it that you disagree with in adaptability?
nothing. Adaptability as as like a concept is great, and I have no like in your marriage example, I completely agree. It's tough for me sitting where I'm sitting today, biting my nails about the outcome of this election, where I feel like there are people who want to adapt the Constitution to be a reflection of who they are and what they think other people should be.
That is
And,
the thing.
um, the lens of history is long. And in this cultural moment, there are people who I would consider extremely dangerous who want to take control of the reins of power and and reshape it in their own image. And I don't want them to do that. And they think that it should be able to be adapted in that way. So, like, if we think about the Constitution as arising from this, like, British Empire that was taxing without representation and yada yada, and it was like sort of the best effort that these people at this moment could come up with to prevent what happened to them to happening to other people. It's not like they had so much perspective beyond what they had experienced themselves that they used to write this document. And yet, on January 6th, when that revolution or
Almost happened.
uprising or yeah, whatever you want to call it, right? Like it's very people have people have a lot of opinions on whether it should be called like a riot, a revolution, a insurrection, a protest, whatever. Um, we saw how fragile those reins of powers are and how easily like a bunch of very aggressive people um could
Yes,
so
you know what? let me say something here. I want to make it a lot more raw than what you're saying, because sugarcoating these kind of talks is not my style. Donald Trump riled up people. These
Yes.
people responded to his leadership. Okay, I'm not taking sides. I'm just stating the facts. They responded to his leadership. They
Yes.
answered the call of war. They
Yes.
attended the battlefield. They won at the battlefield. They went and they sat on the throne. Okay, he didn't show up as leader. Because he said, hmm, what if I show up and then, God forbid, the army isn't with me or something happens, and, like, all this money, all my powers coming back in 4 years. Like, there's so many other ways, better ways diplomatically, that I could turn this around and maybe come back and take over. I don't want to put all my eggs in that one basket with this crazy bunch. So he was thinking of himself, right?
Yes.
Not of the country. Because if you really wanted to make that change for the country, and you really believed in the way that you believe the Constitution should be, you would have followed through with that army. You would have
Yes.
followed through with that
Yeah.
army. So I'm gonna say he did perfectly. And you know what? There are many examples. I'm not comparing him to other people, but just going back to history, a good example of this: Martin Luther King. He riled people up. A lot of people were against what he was doing. There were racist people like, what the hell is this guy doing? But he riled people up, and he marched with them, and he stood there
Yes.
until he got killed. And
Yes.
had he not gotten killed, he would have done more. But he got
Yes.
killed. Let's stop there. That's a good example. Bad example: Hitler. He riled people up, got them to go psycho, to hurt other people in the ways that they did, right? And they followed through with him. But he kept going until, again, he died, right?
Well, he killed himself. Yeah.
Right. But he died eventually. The thing is, Trump didn't do that. He just went halfway. He's like, no, this is not, because he comes from that business mindset, right? It's like, this is not a good, I can take my losses and come back. I did a bad trade. I have $1 billion. I had $1 million trade that's a loss. It's 1% of my loss. I'll cut my losses. I'll recoup it later. And here he is recouping it.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't even call it a business mindset. I would call it a survivalist. I would call it a self
Yes,
self-important,
yes,
selfish view of the world. He was willing to write off those people in order to
yes. And he did.
um
A
and he
lot of them
did,
still
and he
have
did.
debts, and
And
they're in jail and all
yeah,
those things. So he
yeah,
did.
and like that, I don't excuse their choices in that day, but I do um feel like they were betrayed by their leader, certainly. Um the term that I would use to describe what he did is stochastic terrorism, which is to say, if
Mhm.
he tells enough people enough times to go out and do something, eventually there's going to be like some sort of pattern,
Somebody's
like
going to answer that call.
somebody's gonna like say it enough times, there'll be enough outliers and like a statistical anomaly that will take up heed the call, and that's what we saw. So back to the question of adaptability. Yeah, I think the
But
Constitution
that's
should
no,
be.
but that's no adaptability right there. That's what I'm trying to point out. That version, and the people who follow, I've heard so many people who are Trump supporters, not Republican. Like, I differentiate between being a
Mhm.
Republican and being Trump. I don't know how these two got mixed. Like, this is an independent party to me,
Yeah.
right? In the election, it's not
Yeah,
the
MAGA is
representative.
its own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I hear so many people saying, if you don't like our Constitution, if you don't like the way it says it, get out of our country. So that's the rigid, that's the non-adaptability version from where they see it, right? And they love it that way, because they're like, this is our founding fathers. This
But
is
I
what
don't think they understand it because they
we
want
don't.
Trump to be an autocrat. They want him to have no separation of church and state, but also no separation of powers. And that is, I think, the defining characteristic of the Constitution. So I would prefer that piece not be adaptable, right? Like, of all the things that I think we should keep from the Constitution, that's the one that I would hold on to the most. That
But that's a
and
good thing. Why would you? So adaptability
yes,
doesn't mean that you have to change every
right.
single line. It just means that there are lines. For example, slavery is fine.
Yeah,
No, it's not fine. You need
it's
to
not
change
fine. Yeah,
some,
I mean,
right? You see
yes,
what I mean? So
but there are
adaptability means,
processes for adapting it. It moves too slowly. Those processes move too slowly, and there's interventions, right? Like the Supreme Court, which has now become very regressive. So I'm on the fence, right? Because I don't I agree with you that just because you say it can be adapted doesn't mean that that's an argument to throw it all away. I do wish that it could be adapted quicker, but I also recognize that there are people who say, I also wish it would be adapted quicker so I can remove the rights of women to vote. And um, like part of what makes it,
But that's what liberties are. You take that risk. So let me give you a
I
quick
know,
example. Let me give you a quick. Me and you build an app, okay?
yes,
We give it to the government. Here's an app that you can put every damn thought that you want to decide on, and we're going to give it to everybody. Can download this app. It's free for the whole public. You don't even need Wi-Fi. We'll provide it for you. Everything's free to vote on every little thing. Every signpost you want to put on a street, everybody in the country could vote, right? A full democracy, right? Everybody could vote. If you are willing to make a better country, then you must be willing, as the people, to say, I trust that my country does not want to be Afghanistan and silence women.
yeah,
If
right
you
now I'm
cannot
having a hard
trust,
time trusting my
yeah,
country.
that's what I mean. If you cannot trust your country to make that choice, you don't want to adapt. You don't want adaptation. Why do you not want it? Because you're like, at least I know what I'm dealing with here. I have this book. I know what it says in it. I know what I'm dealing with. And worst comes to worst, it's within these lines. But if I open up to adaptability and progress, I'm in a position that 50% of my country actually opposes my idea of progress because
Yes,
where you fall in the political spectrum is literally at 50% right now in your country. So you risk the chance of always losing the coin flip. So
yes.
that's the problem. But then for me as an outsider, I look at the other side of the table. Okay, Trump's crazy. Fine. You can call it that. But who's on the other flip side of the table? That's not some good people either. I don't trust those people.
There
If
are
there was a vote to say we don't want these two, please replenish the board and bring us new candidates, I think that vote will win over those two people.
would agree, but I don't see a lot of people stepping up to be those candidates. That's the other thing, right? So
They
like,
don't have, they don't have the power. There's no equality in
so
politics.
if you
It's so
if
capitalistic. Are you kidding me?
agree, agree, but I also think that if we had a vote on signposts in our street, um, we get like maybe 33% voter turnout on anything, even if it's like on your street, even if it's people just the like in order for the vision that you are presenting to lead to progress, people need to have enough imagination to be able to see what the inclusion of that sign or not having that sign will do for them in this moment short term, because that's just the way people think. And I don't and here we go back to another major American problem. I don't think there are enough Mr. Myerses in the world. I think that like I love teachers. They're like hats off to all y'all who sign up to do this. You are working in a position where you have so much responsibility and totally insufficient authority to communicate the lessons of what it means to be a full
And
participant in
insufficient grades.
democracy.
I want to add that.
Insufficient, no resources, under
Yes,
resourced, but all, like
agree.
you're being
Like,
policed about what you can say. You're being
yeah, teachers should be paid NBA player
completely agree,
salaries for
completely,
real.
a
I mean,
hundred percent agree.
the
I
whole future is them. Is their income.
Yes, they should be the best paid people in the
They should
country.
have liberties. They should have liberties to teach. Like you
Yeah,
say the wrong sentence, there goes your entire like you're gonna be homeless.
agree, completely agree. My one of my best friends in the whole world is a teacher. I We go out together, we meet random people, we're at the bar, we're at the play, we're at the wherever, we travel, we take tours around the world. I'm always like, this is my best friend. She's a teacher. She works with children. And I'm like, isn't she amazing? And here are 10 things that she can like change in the world. Aren't we so lucky that we get to have her in this conversation? Shouldn't everybody who knows her be like, oh my God, tell me how you do it? Um, so, but like, I could talk about her for ages because there's just a million things that she creates for this world that I feel are so important. Is social emotional learning, like skill development, tolerance, uh, sensitivity to your environment, all of these things. But I don't feel like everybody has gotten the privilege of having all of the Mr. Myerses, not because they the teachers are lacking, but because their hands are tied, right? And so um, I don't know that if we had a universal vote on it app, people would have the imagination or the skills to understand why it's important that they decide whether the traffic light should exist on their street or not. And I don't say that because I dislike those people or because I think they're stupid or because I think um, you know, they shouldn't be able to express those things. I think it's because the system overall has failed them and has taught them to curb their imagination and to only think about what is immediately before them today.
So there's two things I want to say there. One, which is the shorter part of it, is I think also it's upon the teachers because we are quick to blame, but we don't want to be accountable or take responsibility in the sense that why don't they come together, bond as a union, and say no? We this and that. I'll tell you why. Part of it is a lot of teachers are thinking about their funds, their position, their security, and a lot of things like that. And they're not that involved in the actual purpose of teaching and the love of teaching and putting their heart in their teaching. There are people like that. And when you go higher, and you don't find those in grade 1, 2, and 3 a lot because all those teachers, God bless them, literally I could easily say all of them with exceptional removing of people. Um, they're all heart. You go to the university level, I knew professors who had their notes from like the 1980s that they were still teaching off of in the 2000s, right? And they didn't care. They had tenure. They were fine. They were thinking about the cottage that they're going to remodel while they're teaching in class. They're just there as capitalism's just rolling through them. That's all it is. So you throw that into the system, it starts deteriorating. Even the respect and everything else starts dropping slowly. So I look at this as a twofold issue, which is better than blame. Why? Because now both sides can come together and acknowledge each other's lack of kind of bring the fire to the table so that they can move things together in a better way. When you continuously blame someone for everything that they're doing that's not allowing you to progress, then it's kind of like you're perfect, the other side is garbage, and so that's why you can't perform. No,
Yep.
because
No, I don't.
you have to act along with it to make things better. So
Yes.
so that's but I agree with you in that part that it's not the teacher's fault. I see that too, but I'm just saying I wish the teachers came together. That's what movements are about. You need to move. You need to move. You can't just sit there and hope the government fixes things all the time. That's the American mindset.
Well, I have a lot of things to say about this. I I see a lot of I think we expect so much of everybody who cares, right? This is like the, the curse of caring in a lot of ways, right? The curse of caring or the curse of competence. Um, it's that the people who show up and do the work, we just sort of take for granted that they're going to show up and do the work. And I would say, like, for teachers, this is a really good, very concrete example in the sense that, like, a teacher in Florida versus a teacher in Louisiana versus one in New York, one in like a rural town in Indiana or whatever, um, they all have very different um, pulls on their everyday life, right? Like the needs in their classroom, let's say K to 12, right? What their students are experiencing with regards to their ability to learn the lessons, right? So is the socioeconomic factors of their town, of their region, of their country, how is that impacting? Do they have enough food to make it through the day without um like falling asleep or getting tired or whatever it is? And teachers have to, you know, adjust on the fly, and then they have to prioritize. Is it my priority to be like a support for this child whose parents have financial troubles, who's food insecure, who's this? So like, am I going to show up in this classroom today and be like a resource for them, or am I going to prioritize this math lesson, or some combination of both? And then if I do, when I make the choice of how I show up in the classroom, I'm also making a choice about how much capacity I have to show up for like the teachers union and also like, all the other committees and whatever else that teachers are asked to participate in, um, and whether how much interaction with parents do I like hold this parent's hand through the fact that their child, maybe missed a week of school because they broke their leg, and like now this parent's very anxious that they're not going to catch up or their grades are going to fall or whatever. Like how much responsibility does this individual have for nurturing a classroom and nurturing the people around the classroom? It is a school is an ecosystem. A teacher is like a gardener of an ecosystem in a lot of ways. And so I feel like it's unfair to say like they need to show solidarity because everybody has their own like piece of that puzzle that they need to nurture and in different ways. And so the concerns are not universal. And obviously I want everyone like solidarity together. Let's move the ball forward. Let's change. But if we ask people to focus on a brighter future, what are they sacrificing today? And can they in good conscience say, well, I got to go to this meeting, so I got to really work on like these lesson plans I'm going to share with everybody, and progress, progress, progress. I'm only able to show up 50% in the classroom for the students who need it the most. So everybody's doing a
Right. But Lizy,
math.
that's what sacrifice and altruism is about. That's part of the issue for me. Part of the issue for me is I see this. You're not the only person bringing this up. I see this a lot, and not only in the U.S., in a lot of the Western Hemisphere, is this idea that you are separate from your cause or your work or your there are compartments to your life. So I go to school doesn't mean that I should check on the wellness of the kids after school at 6 p.m. because that's not my job. My job's from, I get paid from this hour to this hour. But I think if you see bruises on a child, that it becomes part of your job to walk by their home and make sure everything's okay, or kind of try to learn what's going on. Maybe the law doesn't
Yes.
allow certain things, but within the law, without getting arrested, go the extra mile, right? I I keep thinking if everybody went the extra mile, we would be having different conversations right now. But the thing is, people shut down after their required aims. It's kind of like pharmaceutical sales. You hit your target. If there's no crazy bonus above it, you're not going to sell one more
No,
pack.
no, no. I don't okay.
Everybody
I
needs
don't
bonus.
know any I don't know any teachers who like check out at the end of the workday, but I will say that earlier in this conversation you said one thing that you thought was neat about me is that I like my whole life is in alignment, right? And so at different moments and different times, what feels right is going to be different, and people are going to focus more on um different aspects. And so, like, if you look at being a teacher, it's the classroom work. So it's teaching the lessons. It's making sure the students, at whatever level they are, what if they are, average, they have like full hearing, full sight, they have, no genetic defects or whatever, or disabilities that prevent them from, like learning at a typical manner. So we have, you have to teach to those students. You have to make sure they're able to pass their tests. And then you have to think about like the children who do have disabilities, who do have challenges in a normal classroom setting or an average classroom setting. And you have to work to make sure that they can succeed too, right? Like, I don't know any teachers. I mean, maybe I just know great teachers in my life who are like, nah, they're not as valuable. Of course, everybody is equally valuable, whatever their disabilities are, whatever they bring to the table. We have to make this world more accessible for them instead of asking them to be more accessible to this or like adapt to this world. So depending on what your classroom looks like, you may have more time doing that. And then, if you see a child with bruises, then you have to spend more time doing that. And then, the parent who's like, my child missed a bunch of days of classes. Can you do extra time with them? And you're like, maybe not. Maybe this is not something that is 100% aligned with my values because this child will be able to make up the difference. There's no major consequences if this child doesn't get an A. But everybody puts a different pressure on you, and you cannot please everybody. At
Of
the end
course.
of the day, you need to be able to sleep with your
Right.
go to sleep and look yourself in the mirror and know that you did your best. And I think that it's important to recognize that you can't get an A or you can't get 100% in every aspect
No,
every day.
no. You
And
just do the best that you can, right?
you bet the best that
Right.
you can. And to go back to the curse of caring or the curse of competence, is that I do feel like there are some people in the world who ask the people who have signed up for caring, for paying attention, for caring, to carry the full burden
Mhm.
100% of the time, and think, I can rely on this person to do this work, and therefore I don't have to. And that is where I feel the real challenge, the missing pieces, right? So it's the teachers who are always already showing up in the best way they can. So the rest of us really need to step up and say, like, teachers deserve more
Well,
pay. They
that's
deserve
that's the
more
solidarity,
autonomy.
right? Community
Yes.
solidarity. So if the
Yes.
teachers come out and say, "Hey, here's a page, here's a space, here's something that we're asking the public to engage with and interact with, and come and defend and stand with us with, so that we can make better futures because these are the issues," then it opens the space for you and everybody like you to say, "I'm in this. I'm going to put 5% of my time into this now because you know what? It matters to the future of the country." And then you're going to see change happen. But if everybody sits down and kind of like gets scared or boggles down or gets enslaved to the system, it's just going to deteriorate further. So the
I
second
think we're in
part is,
complete agreement
yeah,
here.
exactly. Yeah. And I think the thing is, the second part of what I wanted to tell you is progress. Happens. You were saying about, it's difficult to bring people to that level that I'm thinking at and everything, to imagine that. No, because progress happened in the arts. You come from a musical background. Just look at the 80s, and heavy metal. You had one kind of dominating style, which there was a few bands that were global that had that style, and that flew. Then came technology, in a sense that more bands who were not able to showcase their music now had YouTube or other spaces to showcase their music, and it became different. Even in the 90s, the Nirvanas and other things that came out, they started shifting the landscape. They expanded the music. People didn't have the imagination to think ahead what the music would sound like, what Kurt Cobain is thinking about. They knew Guns N' Roses. That was what they were headbanging to. They didn't know another style. And so the style came about with the education, with the ability to share that with the world through technology. The world heard a different kind of rock. And so they're like, ooh, that exists too. And so they kind of like grew into that. And then it expanded. And then you could find your place exactly where you're looking for, which is why sometimes you find people who are 15 and they're like, I listen to Led Zeppelin. I'm like, what do you know about it? You're 15 years old. Where'd you even hear about that? Right? To me, it's like shocking. But then you're like, okay, they have access to this. Whereas a lot of people in the older generations, they still listen to the music of their generation, whether it's nostalgia or whatever, but a lot of them don't have the technological access or willpower to kind of expand their horizons, right? And be like, ooh, you know what? Little Wayne is catchy for me. I'm 74 years old and I'm into Little Wayne. That doesn't really happen all the time. That's not his target audience because there isn't that ability to expand our senses in that way after a long term. So I think if we provide it, and I think if we allocate the services to elevate and expand and show people the differences, the same things happened with art. The same things happened with so many different things that it exists. Art for hundreds of years used to be sculpture, canvas.
Yeah, yeah.
Hundreds, centuries. All of a
Only
sudden,
in
we
the West, though. In the
yeah,
West, we see
well,
people
yeah, yeah.
around the world.
I'm speaking about like right where you are. Like this was art,
Yeah.
right? And all of a sudden, with technology and travel, art, like travel technology and media technology, you know, art started changing. Now you have different kinds of art. Whereas the performing arts and all these other things existed in the East, but there was no connection to bridge and expand that globally. And then when the connection happened, everybody was like, ooh, jumping on all these new ideas and all these new systems. So I think we are able to, if we do actually make the effort to make that change to be impactful. And I say this because you say something about impact that, when I spoke with you last, you believe there are many different ways to being impactful in life.
Yes.
It's not just one way. And so, the question for me normally when I ask people this, because it comes up often because of, the style of work I'm in, what does impact even mean to you first? Because without defining impact, we can't talk about it when we're talking about two different things about,
Yeah,
what.
yeah, that's a really good question.
So what do you mean when you say I'm being impactful, or I am contributing to social impact, or I am progressing, or I'm helping progress? What does all this mean to you?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's extremely subjective. So when I say I am trying to make an impact, obviously I am talking about what my values are, right? And I live in a place where not everybody agrees with my values. They are also trying to make an impact, and they sincerely believe that they are going to help more people than I'm going to help if their agenda passes. Um, to me, making an impact, the goal that I would work towards, let's start with that, because my goal is to see the people in my community and in the world. This is a very idealistic goal. I know anyone listening is going to be like, oh gosh, and roll their eyes. But like to live in a way where they are able to make the best decisions for themselves because they are not burdened by existential fears for um, being able to feed themselves or live safely. Um, so they can make the choices for themselves and their families that are motivated by their own values and what they think would be best, as opposed to saying, well, I have to take this job because otherwise we're all going to starve and we're not going to be able to have health insurance or whatever. Like, I have a dream of starting my own company. I know that I'll be able to get health care even if I don't have a company paying for it. So, like those kinds of things, I would love to see people free to make the decisions that are allow them to live in alignment with themselves. I
Okay.
guess.
So that's one.
It
Liberty.
liberty. Yeah.
Liberty would
Yes.
be one. The work
Yes.
that
And
you do will impact people by giving them more leverage, more liberty to do what they want to do versus being enslaved. So
yes.
that's
Yes.
it. Liberty
Without
is
being
one part of
captive,
your
I would say
definition.
captive of the system
Okay.
rather than enslaved. Like captive by the system, so restricted by the systems. So to move them closer to like able to live in alignment with their own values and ideals. And so there are multiple ways to do that, right? It's like one is offering opportunities for them to experiment with art in a way that perhaps they haven't had access to in the past, whether it's like workshops or instruction or access to musical instruments or, libraries that offer, book reading competitions, whatever it is. There are all kinds of ways to encourage people to participate in arts and literature and those creative things. Or maybe it is helping people think ahead to what happens after they die. There's a nonprofit here called Wake that helps people think about death care in a way that allows them to die in accordance to their values and provide for their loved ones in accordance to their values. Very interesting. Um, so taking away some of the fear and the unknown in that. Is access to education. It is access to mentorship. It is uh, any number of things, um, clean clean air, clean water, um, science-based healthcare advice.
And you know what? All of the things you're saying, ultimately, at the very, very highest level of what you're saying, it means, or it comes down to, impact reduces suffering of
Yes,
multiple levels. Okay?
yeah,
That's what your impact is. Impact is any action that reduces suffering, because the reduction of suffering includes inherently, I mean, within it, the increase of joy or the increase of everything that is not suffering, which is good, right? So,
yes,
that's where you're coming at now. Capacity's vision is a world, without suffering. So, you're very aligned to everything that we do. Bang on, aligned to everything that we do. And I think a lot of people would agree with your definition. So it is subjective because we can define it in many different ways in its streams, but it is objective in the way that um, most people hope that impact creates goodness. And that version of goodness is in their mind. So even a fascist, if you ask them what's impact, they say making a better world, lack of suffering. How do you reduce suffering? By doing the things that the fascist believes in the fascist world reduces suffering, right? So at the end of the day, everybody's in agreement. All the enemies are in agreement into what impact means. It's just, what does that impact look like is where they where they differ. So having
Yes.
said that, it's important to understand that we can all make impact from a tiny little thing that we do personally to something grand that we do on a scalable level, collectively or even personally. I mean, just to bring names that everybody can know. Uh, you know, Moses had impact on the world as a person. Because the story, whether fable or true, you're an atheist, you're Jewish, you're whatever you believe in, doesn't matter. Just take the story at face value. Dude goes into a city, takes all the people, frees them. Right? That short story. That's it. Right? That's what happens. That is huge impact by one person. Right? That is maximum impact that you can ever think about. Right? Or Noah. He builds a boat, puts every
Saves
living.
all the animals. Yeah.
Like saves like the entire like everything that like put everything in here, it's good, I got it. Like that is maximum impact. Then you go down, you go down all the way to, you see a homeless person who's limping, you're like, what's wrong? I don't know, I think I broke my ankle, but let me take you to the hospital. That's just you pay for the cast or something, the guy heals, maybe cost you a little bit of money, but it was just this quick little small impact. But the thing is, people are doing this like grandiose impact effect to the point that when I walk by the homeless person and I see them limping, I'm like, but does this really make a difference in the world? Because I was listening to this podcast the other day, or this person the other day, or whatever I was listening to or following, and it says you need to make grand change. We need to like change the world. We need to like end poverty. There's so many nonprofits in the world. Their taglines like ending poverty. I'm like, how are you ending poverty? You've been doing this for 90 years. You haven't reduced poverty, never mind end poverty, right? So like, what kind of aspiration what drug are you on? I want to know that. But I like your mentality and your ideology, because you're one of a few people who's like, never mind that. Never mind that whole like spiel, but do that part where you can, like you see a cat stuck in a tree, just pull the cat out. It's not, that's impact. So how did you get to that? Because I think for people who are listening, if they can learn how a person goes from I will only help if it's going to change the world to just help and not think about it. Don't think about the reciprocity of what you're doing.
I don't know. I think I was born seeing like help where you can. Like,
You can't be born that
uh, huh?
you can't be born that way.
Okay, well,
There's no such thing as saying. All I'm trying to say is
I
there's no such thing as saying I was born that way, because it's experiences that shape.
sure. I guess I just always in my I hate a bully. I've always hated a bully. I've always um I've always seen an immediate impact, right? When you say like, "No, I don't tolerate this," to like the relief that people feel when like a bully is stopped, or when they're better able to communicate, or if someone just listens to them and offers them a kind ear, or my dog who I rescued off, she was like homeless or whatever. Um, she's much happier now. I mean, I think based on the way she communicates, the best of my understanding, seems like it's made a big difference. So I find gratification in those moments where I'm able to help on a small level, and those energize me to think of ways that I can bring it to scale. So it's the immediate gratification that I guess some philosophers would say, it's not really doing something good because you're helping yourself because you like to feel good and you like blah blah. I don't really care. Sure, whatever. Um, Maybe I'm selfish when I want to help people because I like to help people and it makes me feel good, but I still like to do it, and I'm gonna. And if I feel this um, gratified and I see the impact of doing this on a small level, like I do want to think bigger. Um, but I don't think that big is the only option.
Yes, do what you can, basically. again.
Yeah, and every day you have a different capacity, right? Like every day I interact with different people. Like I can tip the barista more or less. I can you know, give extra money to a homeless person if I see them. I can know right away that that will help
Buy
with
a
whatever
dozen
their goals are,
beignets
right?
for
Like
your
I think hmm?
buy a dozen beignets for your office instead of a pack of
Yeah,
3.
yeah. Right? Like uh there are so many ways to brighten people's days. I can go to my neighbor's because she's short and I can reach things off the top shelf for her. And or I can lend her my ladder. And I have made her day easier, right? Like I can do that and it's so easy and it doesn't take any effort and like it energizes me then to give more.
Well, thank you for all of this, which really introduces you to the audience, because this was just really character built, because I love what you do. And I'm going to start part two, which everybody can click after part one. And we're going to start part two with the concept of ethical marketing, which is something that is a bit of an oxymoron, by the sound of it, and by what we see in the world today in marketing, advertising, and all that stuff, and the way it just destroyed the world we live in, partially. But then comes Lizy, and she's trying to turn that on its head. And she's not the only person, it's not a pioneering
Certainly
thing.
not.
Yeah, but there's a group of you who are actually making change and difference, and I love seeing that this human is entering marketing versus whatever creature was doing marketing before humans got into it. And so um, part two is going to be, now that people know you a little bit, and they understand your values and understand where you come from in all of those senses. Part two is basically going to be getting into the nitty gritty of the marketing, your work, what you do, your impact, your actual efforts, in the W Fund and other, philanthropic boards that you're on, and things that you're doing in your hometown and your community building and everything else. So we're going to get into all of that, so that the showcase of your impact comes into play and people understand that. So thank you for part one, and thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you in part two.
Yeah, thanks everybody.